Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I'm Matterall. With me today is Elise. How's it going, Elise?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. I'm happily socially distancing myself from everyone except for you guys.
That's right. We're virtual. And Carneros, how you doing, Carneros?
Morning. Good to see all you all.
Carneros and I are both in California, so we're hunkering down. We'll talk more about that real-life situation that everybody is going through because of COVID-19. And wow, it's a new normal very quickly. But first, we're going to talk a lot more about EVE Online, starting with evictions in Wormhole space for TDSIN, and also for a counter eviction that happened to Hard Knocks. So we'll cover both those things. And then we'll get to talk a bit about the Chinese server. Serenity is back and what that means for Tranquility, the European server. And then we'll get on to news. So first, let's meet our guests from Frappuccino. Actually, the initiative now used to be part of AFK, but now the initiative is La Loca. How are you doing, La Loca?
Hey there, I'm doing very good. Hello, thank you for tuning in, guys. Yeah, no, it's been a pretty crazy time. Thank you for using my formal name of Frappuccino, by the way. That's much appreciated on the public stream of EVE.
We just call him Fappy, by the way.
I just stepped right into that one. But also, that second voice you heard there is very familiar. That is Pandorolica from the initiative. How you doing, Pando?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me.
All right, Loca, you suckered me into saying that on the stream, but there it is. We won't edit it out.
Every time, man, every time.
Okay, let's talk about. Let's set this up and talk about it because it's a big deal in Wormhole space and also for EVE Online to see these massive groups colliding in what is basically a very specialized section of EVE Online, essentially made for very, very advanced players and those that are into space exploration, wormholes. So what happened, and start from the beginning.
Things got real crazy real quick. I think the thing that sparked all of this off that is kind of well documented at the moment, and we discussed this on TAS last week as well, is the eviction of TDSIN. This was initiated by a group of, we commonly refer to as the Blue Donut in Wormhole space, which is Laserhawks, Hard Knocks, and Inner Hell, alongside some other groups that had joined in from across Wormhole space, and quite a large Wormhole contingent tried to defend them. Initiative got an opportunity to go in with via a frig hole and to try and help defend them a little bit after an unsuccessful fight earlier, and things just sort of escalated from there. We ended up counter-evicting Hard Knocks one day after the initial eviction started, so there was simultaneously two ops running alongside each other with two evictions.
Okay, so that's the summary about it. Why is this important? Why are we paying attention to it? This is a question I get asked a lot by Null-Sec people who want to ignore Wormhole space.
I think the significance of it is it's hard to get a grasp of it from outside of Wormhole space, but within Wormhole space, these kind of events are very rare and far and few in between. People tend to refer to Wormhole space as a timeline, and you always remember these big evictions that happen. Essentially, the reason why fights in evictions in particular are so sought out and so remembered is because normally in Wormhole space we have mass limitations on what can be brought through the wormhole, and with evictions, by taking whole control and by preceding and with home defense doctrines, that takes the jumping through the wormhole aspect of the fight out of the equation. So all of a sudden you have these typically small groups all working together with unlimited mass restrictions based on what they've managed to get in the wormhole so far, brawling it out, and these things are usually very expensive, and they're usually as well very final. in that once you've lost a fight in that wormhole, you really struggle to get back in. So there's a lot riding on it. It's essentially one fight to justify whether you get to keep your home or lose it. And for that reason, it's a very addicting style of gameplay to some people, because it's a lot of risk and it's a lot of reward if you get it right. And these things you tend to see these huge battle reports come out on Zkillboard, and everybody else gets to see them as well.
Yeah, we had someone from Inner Hell on a few weeks ago, actually, and they were mentioning that, it's, even if you don't succeed in the eviction, it's definitely a good way to get someone to actually fight you, right? Because people are fighting for everything they have in the wormhole. But I was gonna ask, did the recent change to the mechanics that allowed more people, like frigate holes, to be unable to be closed, did that play any role in these evictions? Do you think this would have happened regardless, or is it kind of like just a happy meeting between like the mechanics changing and all of this?
I think what's unique about these two particular so these evictions in Wormhole space have been going for a long time, and they've always included a huge number of people. Typically what's happened in the past is the attackers have come in with a large enough force to hold hole control, then the defenders have rallied everybody they possibly can that's already in the hole and then defended. The change in mechanics that's happened recently, which has caused some discussion, is frig holes have always been they've always been able to regenerate. They've always had quite a lot of mass for the amount that you could jump through them, so they were very difficult to roll, but there was a mechanic that allowed you to roll them. Now, this mechanic has been used in Wormhole space for about 7 years now, and it's been known, but what happened was a fix. It was essentially a bug fix rather than a content change to it was almost a glitch that allowed you to add more mass after you click jump. So after you'd gone through the barrier where how much you could jump through was allowed, you could then add mass by cycling an extra large prop mod. So something you'd see quite typically would be a devoter with the module to reduce mass, jump through the frig hole and then activate a 100 MN afterburner, and then that would add mass to the devoter, put more mass through the hole, and then that would help to reduce the overall capability to jump through it. What's different now is it's actually extremely difficult or impossible, we don't fully know yet, to actually get rid of these frig holes using this rolling technique. And this has actually been stated by CCP as intentional. Exuki kindly let us know about that. So the way that this has sort of changed the dynamics of these fights is defenders, if a frig hole spawns to the connection or connects to the wormhole where the eviction is happening, the defenders can now add numbers en masse. And this is what's allowed several fights to happen in TDSIN's home. The attackers can't do anything about it.
Really adding people, or is it just mostly psychological pressure on the whole control side? In these last couple of evictions, were there significant numbers that actually came through those frigate holes?
100%, yeah. Because I think the thing that it allows you to do is defenders typically have a whole load of assets inside the wormhole already, and frig holes allow interceptors to burn through, which are very difficult to stop warping off. So typically, people can bring a large group of interceptors through, reship them, and then commit to the fight. An example of this would be the final fight in TDSIN's on where Test were able to reship into Tempests. They brought through an interceptor gang reshipped and then went out and fought in the Tempest. On the other side of that, there was also I believe a Pandemic Horde fleet and a Goon fleet in there that were just in destroyers because of the limitations of mass, and they couldn't reship because there was only so many assets left in the hull. So it's a careful balance, but we've definitely seen an increase in defending numbers where there's been frig holes involved if people have decided to use them, which isn't always the case, but it's and that's definitely new as a result of the change in mechanics there.
The thing is also, now that people know these frig holes are here to stay, the defenders are going to be way more prepared for that situation. So you hear that point, especially coming from HK side, which I think is correct, that now Null-Sec groups have an easier way in, and they will take more part in those, because now you have a guarantee to get in. Before that, I get poked all the time. Hey, there's someone here. Like, can you help us? You got an entry? No, they have home control. Like, what am I supposed to do, right? I'm outside. But now I can get in there anytime I want if there's a freehold, right? And the defenders are going to have like massive amounts of like Tech 1 battleships or battle cruisers or whatever they want to fly ready to go for these scenarios. So they can get that bad phone in. I mean, it's not that much of an investment to have, 500 Hurricanes there for wormholers. That's very much, a valuable kind of thing.
That's such
So
a cool
I think
little
that point stands. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but that's such a cool little mechanic to say, like, yo, we just have 500 destroyer battle cruisers lying around, and they will just poke Null-Sec groups if there's a freehold and be like, hey, do you want to? We will recruit you to be militiamen. Just take these free ships and go shoot people for it. That's really funny.
Yeah, we have the spears. Just
Yeah.
go into the cave.
Yeah, but so the argument is also like now this fight happened and it was all great. I mean, I would have loved to be in that fight. Sadly, we had to hold rage, but in general, the attackers also know that the defenders know. So are the attackers now going in, taking on let's say TDSIN's new wormhole, knowing they're going to be more prepped this time and they have like unlimited amount of battle cruisers or battleships or whatever they want. So are they even going to go to that extent of an effort and investment to even try? Right, that's the problem. So,
well, how did they get you involved? Why did Initiative get involved at all?
Well, for that I should probably go back when we first evicted them, because obviously that's like kind of where it started, us versus HK. Even though there's no grudge, like I don't even know anyone from HK besides Loro and ex-HK member that are not anymore in HK, but there's a little bit of history there.
When you said you evicted them, you evicted Hard Knocks and you destroyed their keep stars in their hole, and that was like a big turning point. By the way, was that January last year or the year before?
It was December 2018.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you did that, but there's no grudge. But why are you helping TDSIN?
Not from my... So let's say when we first evicted them, there was like a goal, like the dream scenario for us when we first went in to kill the Keepsters. We wanted to get in there, burn that place to the ground, kill everything, maybe loot a good chunk of ISK, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
But we also wanted a good fight. And we had the idea that, Wormhole Space has suffered under that kind of coalition scenario that they built up over time, right? The three big alliances working together. So we were hoping that wormholers would then, come and help us a little bit. And we were actually hoping that would happen the first time. But it didn't. We also didn't get the fight. I mean, we did get one fight and they, fucked it up and that was it basically. But it wasn't the epic fight we were hoping for, right?
Well, you also had an unbeatable doctrine at the time to destroy structures.
That kind of gets me triggered to say that's an unbeatable doctrine.
all right. I'll back off. At least
I tell you what, I've said it a couple of times, right? And it might sound cocky or whatever. If we were in the same situation at the time, we would have beaten them, all right? So it's not unbeatable.
Yeah, that's
it's a different meta,
right?
One of the perks to creating a doctrine, like you can deconstruct it, so you guys kind of know it inside and out, and you know what the weaknesses are because you've faced it so much, right? But these wormholers, they might not know. But yeah, it was a very effective.
Exactly what we banked.
I should say it that way. But that's the perk of that's why people want these theory crafters in their alliances to come up with these doctrines, because you get an insane advantage, at least for a short time period, as people try and deconstruct it and figure it out. You already know what the counter is, and you can counter the counter even if you want to go that far. If you want to play like 8D chess. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to see your take on like the wormhole thing and just how you guys got involved.
Yeah, well, so that was just the start, obviously. And then some people might not be aware, but we went into Rage maybe half a year later. I forgot when that was. That wasn't an eviction attempt though, right? So we jumped in and we jumped in with like 200 Stukas, right? So we kind of wanted to emulate the same thing and bait them out, which they actually took the fight. I'm not sure if they completely bought it and just went in saying, okay, this is actually a good fight scenario, so we're not risking getting evicted if we lose this fight or anything. So they whooped in a bunch of caps, which were super hardcore tanked, and it took us a long time to grind down. And then they brought in some low keys, right? So we had a good brawl with the low keys, and I forgot how much is like around 100 bill or something got killed there, right? Wow. So that was the good fight part. So first time we burned the place to the ground. The second time we got the good fight. And then now it's the third time we went in. And this time this wormhole thing happened that, you know, wormholers actually saw like, yeah, they're kind of right going in there saying HK and the other guys, the wormhole blue donuts, they're a little bit too powerful, and they were sick of it. Right? So finally, some wormholers were banding together and then, you know, built some kind of a coalition, like a loose coalition, I would say. And yeah, that was just, you know, good to see. And that for us, I know that's what Ari said was like basically behind a lot of this the wormhole stuff we do. She said that it felt like now the whole thing was complete, right? So it felt like it was all part of that one thing. And finally we completed the whole quest, you know?
Chapters in a story.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like all 3 objectives done now.
That's a big change in mentality, because before that, even when you guys were doing the rage thing, the first rage eviction in December 2018, like the whole, at least from what I understand, and I might be horribly wrong here, but wormholers kind of had this unspoken bond or unspoken rule that if Null-Sec ever got involved in wormhole space, they would all put their differences aside and band together to thwart the mighty Null-Secers and stuff like that. And now that kind of has shifted to, hey, we can just make sure there's not this huge coalition within our own space, and we'll enlist Null-Sec help if we have to. Right? Am I wrong in that? Maybe we.
Yeah, that was always that. I mean, I think it's not necessarily always the honor, like it's so honorable to do this kind of part. It's probably also a lot of wormholers are sitting around that have nothing to do and they want to be part of something big. You know, it's not like everyone who's shown up to all of this is always just, you know, thinking for the greater good. It's just, you know, it's a fun thing to do. So they pick a side. And the first time, they didn't pick our side, which was a little disappointing because we felt like, hey, we're the good guys, come on, right? But, you know, it didn't work like that. So I felt like I felt like that was the lesson the first time. That was the lesson we learned was the whole, not media, but what do you call it? The PR part of the side of things. I think we fucked up on that part. Yeah, the narrative, the PR kind of side of things. We didn't quite get it, right? So we kind of fucked it up a bit.
Well, I do know there were hard feelings from all wormholers, not just HK. Like there's a lot of wormholers didn't even like HK, but they wanted to defend HK because before there is rivalries in wormholes, there's rivalries in game style. So wormholers felt like they were all being attacked by Null-Sec, and that trumped their anger at HK for picking on them.
So that's not fair, because
why not?
The second we come in and play their game style, then we're wormholers, aren't we? You know what I mean? Like if we can do the same thing and we go out and do this, like, why would you then say, no, I don't like it because you were before that, you were a Null-Sec guy, right? So where's the line? Like, at what point do you become a wormholer, really?
Right.
Hart was holding Snuff at the time. Don't forget that, right? So they're Null-Secers too, right?
Yeah, I got you. And it's interesting in reverse too, like are wormholers, if they just jump into Null-Sec and pick off people who are mining or whatever, or do you know what I mean? And like Skill You, were they wormholers or were they actually, or Volta, were they wormholers? Or are they just guys that use wormholes to attack known space?
Oh, they're Thera boys. And apparently, according to the lore, and Exuki reminds me of this all the time, Thera is not a worm, or maybe it's Ashrathi. Sorry, I conflate the two sometimes. Ashrathi reminds me that Thera is not technically a wormhole. It's like this weird case of wormhole. So Volta,
Right. The wormhole is only the passage between known systems and unknown systems.
but we have Laloka as well, who we should probably bring in here because he knows a lot about the actual wormhole culture instead of me just like spouting like propaganda apparently or random memes. Loka, why don't you come in and like help us all out?
Yeah, Loco, when do you become a wormholer?
Oh,
Explain this.
6 years of experience and rolling holes and but only that. You have to be in at least 3 wormholes. Anyway, so
let me just say, I think it's when your skin turns really white because you haven't seen the sun in like 2 weeks or, never mind. Translation.
Well, because you've only seen the sun, but in game whilst holding hole control. That's the. But no, absolutely. I mean, you're pretty spot on there, Elise. I mean, I think you're right in saying the big difference between this eviction and the previous eviction back in December 2018 is the wormhole contingency. There was a big split down the middle of wormhole space, and people are actually referring to what's going on right now as World War Wormhole. You know, people are actually really excited. There's all these evictions going on the side right now as a result of what's happened over these couple of evictions. So it's kind of an exciting time to be a wormholer right now. But essentially, I think the overriding feeling at the moment was over the last year, there's been several evictions that have happened. And, you know, some of these have been mentioned off the cuff, like the Beyond the Breach eviction and so on. I think perhaps people felt the TDSIN eviction was one too many. Like, I think there was that sort of feeling across wormhole space where we were thinking, okay, if we're being honest with ourselves here, the amount of activity in C5 space is going down. I experienced that firsthand being in AFK. We'd raid roll a lot and not find many things. And in general, we were sort of thinking, how many more groups need to be evicted until it's just dead in here and it is just the big 3? And that feeling mixed in with the TDSIN eviction where there was that sudden focal point, I think everybody sort of went, hang on a minute, we got evicted a few years ago. Why are we helping them against in it? Maybe there was some trust with me in that I'd been in AFK for a long time and we'd started a co-op that had created a lot of content and a lot of enthusiasm. And people could see that perhaps in it weren't in there to burn down wormhole space, but actually we just wanted to have a bit of a play. Let's, add something to the game that contradicts the other side of it at the moment, which is overwhelming in numbers. And people were sort of more open and willing to work together on that. There are wormholers that for the first time ever blued goons over this op. They still feel dirty a little bit. I know that for certain. You know, but the thought of that happening 2 years ago would never have happened. But I think people have just reached a point now where they've got to a point where they just want to say, hang on a minute, this is enough. And enough people came out at the same time to say this, that they realized actually the group of wormholers that were doing this is actually quite large. And we were matching in it for numbers inside that wormhole. I was doing the FCing for the wormhole side of things while Pando managed the init side of things, and we were matching them on numbers comfortably. So I think there's a sudden realization now that actually it is possible. It's not just a fruitless expedition to try and counter these evictions that are going on. So now everybody's a bit excited and everyone's thinking, well, if they can do it, then we can do it here. And people are starting to evict farmholes and things are brewing quite nicely. So there should be a lot more content coming up.
Yeah,
That's
I wonder.
Really big paradigm shift in just 2 years.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is the evictions, but also there's people talk about content evictions, and when they refer to them, they sort of say, okay, we're evading TDSIN because we want to get a fight out of this. But I think everybody else is thinking, okay, you guys get a fight out of this, then afterwards TDSIN are evicted. There's much less for us afterwards. Why are we just standing back and allowing this? I'm fair enough to them. They want to get involved on one side, or maybe they've been evicted in the past and they just think, right, this is the moment we can actually get revenge. This is the moment we've got enough people behind us to have a go. And yeah, and everyone's eager for the next thing. Normally after an eviction, there's a burnout, but right now there's so much enthusiasm for it.
I wonder if the psychological part of things, like, so when we first jumped to that free code into TDSIN's wormhole to help them, all we could do at the time was take whole control away from Hard Knocks and friends and then open the door, right? So that's what we did. We jumped in, we forced them basically to log off, and then TDSIN could get all their friends in. So our idea was not to stay in there, which we didn't, in the end. Our idea was just to open the door and let all the wormholers get in. So we jumped out again when we felt like, okay, they've got a decent, amount of people in, and they can maybe defend themselves now. And I feel like that was also important from a wormholer perspective, because they might not want to work with us. That's one of the reasons why we jumped out again. We're not here to fight for you guys. Just do it yourself. There you go. And I think when then Hard Knocks and so on brought in Null-Sec group themselves with Fraternity, that's where this shift happened, really, right? Because they brought in 200 Fraternity Munins to have them out then. And then it's like, okay, if they work with the dirty Null-Sec guys, we can work with the Null-Sec guys, right?
Were they first, or were you first?
Well, we were in first, but we jumped out again, right? There was only, I think,
preemptive.
No, we jumped in, opened the door. It's totally fine, right?
This is going to be.
We were just coming in for a visit.
For a visit. This whole thing reminds me of like a mom coming into the basement and like opening the curtains and dusting and fumigating the place. And it's like you wormholers need some more light in here.
Well, they didn't have a chance of getting that whole control back, right? So someone had to come in and help them.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what we did. We jumped out, and then I told my guys, basically, that's always the thing about Null-Sec groups. That's why they are not involved usually, is it's a huge commitment to make Null-Seckers stay in a wormhole for a week or like a couple of days. You have to very much think about that if you want to do that, right? We can do that, but it has to be really worth it to do it, right? People need to be behind that. So we jumped in, we felt like, okay, we cannot stay here for like 5 days straight anyway, or we can, but it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. And then maybe wormhole guys are not going to, rally up behind them because Null-Sec is involved, right?
Staying in the wormhole space for like 4 or 5 days, it's very reminiscent of like some of Eve's first wars, right? Where there was like hell camping that would go on for like a long weekend or even like a week at a time. And it's interesting, like there's so much potential like risk doing that now, right? You have your supers that are ratting, your oracles that are ratting. If you're stuck in this wormhole, you can't really do home defense because everyone can move around so much. But it is funny that you guys mentioned that. Like wormhole space does remind me a lot of, at least from what I hear, it reminds me a lot of like very early Eve fights. It's very cool.
Yeah, but the TD, I know you wanted to a question. Let me just squeeze this in. TDSIN, why help them? Was it just because you're against Hard Knocks, or because you put them as number 2 on your voucher or ballot for CSM, which worked because that's how Exuki got in?
Well,
do you have a special relationship with Exuki, the leader of TDSIN?
We put him on number 2 after Stitch Caneland, who's also small scale, like a different candidate, right? And I think we're going to make it a tradition too to vote smaller guys. But I didn't.
And he did very well, by the way.
Exuki did.
Exuki made it in, but Stitch made it to almost the last round. He did very well in the CSM. Yeah, probably thanks to you guys.
But sadly, he didn't get in because, like, I just think the content creation, that part is lacking on the CSM right now. But whatever. I didn't talk all that much to Exuki. We don't have like a super close relationship. Like I didn't want him to think like, oh yeah, you owe us something or any of that stuff, right? Like he came across like the right candidate and then he earned it, right? So he's on the CSM. He can do whatever he wants with that. And I think he did a great job. It's not like we were talking every day. Like he said, I think when he got elected, he's like, hey, I guess I have to thank you guys. And yeah, that was basically it. We talked here and there, but it's not like daily contact or any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But it just felt right. And it's against HK. So, especially our wormhole guys like Ari and so on. Like, it doesn't take much convincing. Right? I think it was actually Ari starting this whole thing, saying like, hey, we should. I think Ari and Loka.
Are they the same ones? Well, Alok is now in initiative after being in AFK for a while.
Yeah, he joined my corp as an exception. Yeah.
Yeah, I joined DEFCON and 2 weeks later Rage dies. I mean, what a coincidence.
So he's in a German corp? That's funny.
Yeah, we make exceptions though, and like recently we made like almost too many, I would say. Like it's kind of weird to have a German corp or any language, any other language, and then change it afterwards. That's not fair to your guys, right? So it's a little bit of a tricky subject in corp, but I think we're doing a great job so far.
They want the foreigners out, huh?
I have downloaded Duolingo, but I've not used it yet.
They'll make you an honorary German. It's fine.
Perfect.
But it's so last week we had some people from HK on, and their version of so I don't want to say their version, but so in EVE Online there's always like two realities, right? The reality of one group and the reality of another group. It doesn't mean that one is right, one is wrong, just how they feel and how they experience the game. So Hard Knocks last week, they were very much more, I don't want to say doom and gloomy about the frigate hole mechanic and the fact that invasions or evictions are getting much harder. But their opinion was, and I'll summarize a little bit and editorialize, it was, well, now that these frigate holes exist and it's this big spooky scepter that's always rattling, no one is ever going to evict anyone ever again. So that area of like wormhole lifestyle is now dying. You guys come on and say, well, because of the frigate holes, now not everyone is scared of being evicted. And so now life is kind of thriving. Where do you think that those realities are going to meet in the middle? What do you think is going to happen to wormhole space or what do you think wormhole space is going to look like, say 6 months from now? Are there going to be evictions still going on with the same regularity that they used to be? Will there be more people living there?
I think it's both correct. I think it was probably Laurel on, right? I checked out like a couple of minutes, I think.
Yeah,
and he's
right.
Psycho,
yeah.
So I can tell you from a Null-Sec perspective how it is. I'm not a wormholer, right? I'm just a wormholer.
Wait a minute, you just were a few minutes ago.
Hey, I changed my mind, all right?
Okay,
I can be a wormholer one day and then a week later.
I vacation in Spain. I vacation in Spain, so I can be Spanish once in a while.
But yeah, so from a Null-Sec perspective, it's exactly what I said earlier. Like now you have a guaranteed entry. So now blobs can form big group, like big fleets and get in. Because before that, I can't form 200 people and then say, hey, let's sit in this wormhole and wait till we have an entry, which probably never happens. That's a no-go, right? You waste 200 people's time for that. But now there's a freak wormhole right here. It's an entry from Tenerife. And we can just burn there, jump in, and we're in. So there's a guarantee now. And then that changes it dramatically, I would say. So yeah, big evictions with big promising fights. Null-Sec will get involved 90% of the time. There's always one group that's going to be willing, and they're going to poke everyone, right? So, and then it might just escalate. Oh, like Init is there, then NC is suddenly interested, like, and then it escalates from there maybe. And then wormholers don't even have any impact in the fight anymore because they had only 50 dudes in the first place, and there's like 1,000 Null-Sec guys fighting over I can totally see that happen. But at the same time, defenders people might just be more comfortable putting up Fortizars and live in wormhole space and have more daily contents on a smaller scale. But eviction stuff will suffer from that 100%. Yeah.
Well, I love the idea of diplomats now being essential to wormhole life. Maybe they were before, but I think it was probably a different thing. Now they're going to have a stronger relationship, a range of people they can talk to and be allowed to talk to, because that's what diplomats do. They'll take your call or they won't. It depends on who you are and what you represent. And so there's a whole hierarchy to diplomacy in EVE, which is a whole hidden part of EVE Online that people don't see that much. But the thing so I've been talking kind of on behalf of wormholers for most of this show, but I want to say, like, what are wormholers? Aren't they just like that tribe that went over whatever that Ice Age strait was that allowed them to become something else? I mean, they're really just mutations of Null-Sec players anyway, aren't they? They just got lost in caves a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean,
Who says they own the wormholes? Like, why do they get to own the wormholes? This game is about power and dominance and diplomacy, and nobody owns anything unless you can keep it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. Let me climb down off this soapbox here for a second.
Well, like, so the question, like, at what point do you become a wormholer? I think, yeah, if you live in a wormhole, right? So if you do your daily business or everything in a wormhole, but that can change. Like, some people become wormholers for a period of time, and then they're Null-Seckers again. Like, the line is a little bit more blurry than people want to make it out. Especially the elitist mindsets of some wormhole groups, it's just, I don't know, it's a little annoying sometimes, They're like, we're completely different. No, you're not, right?
Well, they're pretty good, though. You got to admit, they're good fighters.
They're pretty good at what they do, but if you bring something else, what they're not good at, they don't shine all that much, really, right? If the situation changes, they struggle just the same.
Pound for pound, those guys are pretty savage. What do you say? Okay, they can't kill 50 Stukas, but
why can't they? Why can't they?
Good question.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, let's
ask
a little bit easier question, though, for a moment, because we've got listeners to the podcast who don't know all about wormhole life. If you're living in a wormhole and you realize that the hostiles in local are actually not here for a fight, they are here to try to evict you, what do you do? What are your normal preparations you make, or how do you go about saying, how do you defend your wormhole? Besides having your diplomats call everyone you know and say, help, we need people. I mean, what else do you do?
So as you were saying with the diplomats, right, you want to get people in there. So the focus becomes about how can we take hull control? How can we reestablish the entrance to our hull to be in our favor? So you look at your time zone. Quite often wormhole corps are quite small. They'll tend to focus on one time zone. Some of the larger ones will operate across many, but typically people have one. And they will say, okay, let's get everybody back who we can get in. Let's build they'll typically have what we call a home defense doctrine crafted, which is a doctrine specifically for fighting in that wormhole. Usually if there's an effect in that wormhole, it'll play to the strengths of that. And then they'll say, okay, at this point, at this time, we're going to have a big fight. We're going to try and take hull control, and then we're going to try and get people in. Or alternatively, they'll log off and quit, which sometimes happens recently. Essentially, the general focus point becomes about getting the numbers in to establish hull control and then start working through any hostile structures that have been placed in the wormhole and gradually deleting things like any anchored rights roofs and things like that. But essentially, it all focuses around that one thing, which is establishing a route in, which is why the freak hull capability or changing capability is so significant at the moment.
Okay, then why were there all the rumors about hard knocks being told to each by freighters? And how does that fit into, freighters, how does that fit into preparing to defend your wormhole?
So there's two different strategies you can use, right? One is we're going to fight, we're going to take hull control, and we're going to defend our home. The other is we're going to roll over, we're going to accept that we're just going to lose everything in this system, and we're going to prevent as many losses as possible. The freighter strategy is focused purely around getting as many assets as you can logged off so they're in safety so that they can't be destroyed, and then you'd be able to, after the eviction has happened, log back in and set back up again. Hard Knocks use this strategy for Rage, and TDSIN used the other strategy to fight for Solaris.
But you can't do both at the same time, because that pilot is stuck in the freighter can't be used for fighting combat, right? So you either decide... Yeah, okay.
Because quite commonly, especially in these very rich, and something else that's quite common about wormhole space that I think is different to Null-Sec is how many pilots per person people have, the amount of accounts they run and things like that. In Null-Sec, it can get pretty crazy when you get up to the supers and titans level, but in wormholes, you need 2 accounts just to get into most C5 corps at the moment. So basically, people will have freighters on alts, and then maybe they'll have what we'll call PvP alts, where they can fight in home defense doctrines. Then they'll log off in the freighters. For whatever reason, Hard Knocks didn't do that. They had some pilots stuck out with TDSIN, and then they decided to log off every other pilot in freighters and prevent as many losses as possible.
Thank you.
Ari there in chat is saying that's a form of asset safety, which is kind of funny.
It kind of is, yeah. Right. So, yeah, it's so one thing that's fundamentally different mechanically in wormhole space is that all loot drops. It's 100% drop rate. There is no sudden movement of assets to low sec or high sec or whatever. So this leads to evictions where people are focused on loot, and I think Hard Knocks decided on their eviction that is the reason we were there, that we were there to get loot, and it wasn't. This was kind of like a misplaced fallacy a little bit. It was a bit, they decided why we were evicting them, and then they decided to prevent losses, but the reality was it was actually based on other factors, so it didn't really make a difference to whether or not we wanted to participate. But it benefits the defender absolutely to make sure you prevent as many losses as possible and that you don't lose too many assets. But then you're also committing to things like self-destructing any ships that you can't fit into your freighter or any capitals that you don't have pilots to cover. And this led to, I think, 60 or 70 caps being self-destructed in Rage while we were in there. So it's an effective method of denial, but it doesn't necessarily prevent you from suffering huge losses.
There's also the thing of making looting a pain by creating extra loot that isn't worth anything, right? By dropping a few minerals in a can, cap boosters, wreckage, just throwing junk in cans.
It's not that bad, though. People are quite happy to walk around and find a cap boost every now and
Sometimes they need it.
There's also some childishness that goes on where they quickly use not asset safety, but the transfer assets thing to
they deliver stuff.
Deliver stuff to like Vile Rat and some of our past players who have passed on. That's like childish and uncool.
Yeah,
maybe I shouldn't have an opinion. I'm just a talk show host.
But then
that was happening in this past week.
Yeah, there's always that one idiot in every alliance, though, right? Like, I'm not gonna spin it into like Hard Knocks being the bad guys, but yeah, that happens.
Yikes! All right, well, so the overall picture, if I have it right, is that Inner Hell, Hard Knocks, and Laserhawks did, in fact, manage to destroy pretty much TDSIN's home. In return, Hard Knocks' home was also destroyed for the most part. And both these groups will probably rebuild, I imagine, in their same systems.
Man, it's gotta be great if you're Inner Hell, right?
Right, they're making money.
Nothing happened to you, and you killed the guys you came to kill.
I wouldn't say
your allies just got.
So I think short term HK, they can probably claim victory because they went out for their objective and they got it done. But it's not a long term victory, I believe. Right? The damage they've done to the whole Wormhole community with it, that's going to have long term real problems for them. And for now, they're probably going to be happy and build up they already have a new fort up in Rage, and we didn't even contest that. There was a free call, funny enough, before it went up. We had eyes on that, but we didn't go in there.
I might have said HK, but I meant to say Inner Hell. Like Inner Hell must be.
Yeah, I know, but same for Inner Hell. Same for Inner Hell.
You said it right.
And so all three of them, that's like one coalition: Inner Hell, Laserhawks, and HK. It's the same thing, right? So long term, there's going to be problems with that. And then obviously, I mean, maybe NL is next if we're in the mood, you know.
Well, little threat there. Let's see. Well, so the loot that dropped out of TDSIN, I'll say it right, TDSIN, was about 500 to 600 billion worth of assets. And remember, they being Inner Hell and HK and Laserhawks had destroyed a few weeks ago Mouth Trumpet, and that one was about 300 billion. So these guys are getting close to $1 trillion in winnings after really ransacking the major rivals, right? The other wormhole groups that are big.
Well, I think that's the number that dropped. How much they actually then converted and how much profit they made, like consider the investment and all that stuff. You know, it's not as significant for like a bigger wormhole group as people might think, right? So
Yeah.
In Rage, for example, in the first one, that it was like 4 trill or something. But we also invested a shit ton. And then try looting that field in a controlled manner. Like there's no way. So stuff gets looted left, right, and center, and you know it ends up in all kinds of places. But it's not like Init made a chunk of ISK there. Like Init basically didn't get anything. We paid out the guys that put in all the work, and the
goons took off with everything. I remember that night.
We told everyone.
We covered it live.
To loot.
Oh, okay. Because I remember you guys were like, nobody loot, and everybody was looting, and it was like, all right, everybody loot.
No, the rule was, the rule was give it 30 minutes for the guys that put in the work, and they had a head start, right? So they had 30 minutes to warp to all the cans and loot whatever they could, and most people, I mean, at the end of the last time, I'd had 1,500 people on the kill mail, right? The very last timer, which was like that epic kill mail, everyone wanted to be on. There was like a shit ton of people, right? So there was a good chunk of people just warping around doing whatever. But in general, most people stayed, like, respected that rule, and it worked out fine, right?
Yeah. So, and there were plenty of cap boosters for everyone.
Exactly.
All right,
it was fun to watch, I can tell you that.
Okay, I'm saying it right now. TDSIN. That's what I call them, right? That's what I've been saying, except somebody corrected me. Okay.
Yeah, what's so fun about that name? I don't get it. TDSIN?
I don't know. TDSIN. If you say it really fast, I think it starts titty to part? Like... Yeah. I think it... Now I have to bleep some stuff out. I don't know.
What, the TD part? Is it becoming
moving on. Moving on. Yeah, where's this Loka? Let's bring you back in. Well, where's this leave us? What's going to happen with wormholes?
Well, so I mean, we can delve into the aftermath. There's lots of scouts that have moved around. So essentially, people have been putting scouts in systems that they're anticipating they want to have a play in. There's been an eviction attempt of Parabellum, who are actually unrelated to pretty much everything going on. They're Russian. They used to be allies with Inner Hell. They did some things while they were allies with Inner Hell, and then they are no longer allies with Inner Hell as of recently. And people tried to evict them, and then that was forced back. Also, there was an attempt at eviction of AFK, where carriers were being seeded by Inner Hell, but they established all control very quickly while still on the raid job, and that seems to be secure at the moment, so we're not anticipating any trouble there. There's a feeling of things are in recovery at the moment. So people are sort of getting their breath back a little bit from what was a hectic 2 days. People put off real life commitments and things like that, put off family things, so people are going back to their real lives and settling back in a little bit just to recover. And then I think soon there's big plans that are in the works. Many of us have some goals that we want to achieve. The overwhelming feeling at the moment, particularly across the wormholers, is that we're not finished. There is more that wants to be done. People want to take advantage of the momentum and work together on more ops. So it's quite exciting, really. There's a lot of unknowns. The phrase I've been saying to people is that April's going to look a lot different to March, because we don't know what will have happened between now and then,
Is it mostly because of the psychology of having seen Null-Sec participating, or is it mostly because of the changes that CCP have put into the game, or is it a combination of both? I mean, what's causing the fact that April is going to look different from March?
I think the biggest reason for it is there's enough interest from in general in wormhole operations at the moment that, you know, we're kind of curious. You know, we want to poke the bear a bit and see what happens. But also, for probably about 6 years now, the top wormhole groups have been the same for a long time, and there is some indication. Hard Knocks not contesting their home is unheard of. I mean, they will tell you that quitting is winning, that they deny loot. But, you know, in reality, Hard Knocks logging off in their home is something that's completely unheard of and wouldn't have happened for a long time. And it wouldn't have happened without Init's involvement. Now, there is that feeling that, hang on a minute, if they're logging off, then they're not capable of fighting this. So what can we do from here? Are the people that are at the top still the same people? Is there a chance for a shake-up here? And also, all of these farmholes that have been taken, there's this big network of maybe 80 to 100 farmholes that are controlled by Inner Hell, Laserhawks, and Hard Knocks. And the reason why they were able to protect so many, despite, you know, being 3 corps, is that sort of overwhelming feeling of superiority that they had, and that's gone now. That's something that has changed significantly in the last couple of weeks, is that feeling that no matter what, they would always come out on top. That isn't there anymore, and we can see that with Rage. So, you know, it's interesting to see what comes up next. There's a huge amount of wormhole support for other ops. There's a huge amount of support in it for other ops if we decided to go for it. So it's really about picking and choosing what we want to do from this point onwards.
So it's super interesting. And I'm gonna really isolate our audience down to like 4 people who watch golf, competitive golf.
Oh God.
When Tiger Woods was at the top of his game, he seemed unbeatable, and a lot of it was not just his pure talent, but the mentality was of everyone else is, hey, we're playing for second. We know Tiger's going to come in first. When his life kind of fell apart and he became, you know, human again, that's when all these other there was way more parity in the golf world. So to the 4 other people that watch competitive golf and watch the PGA, it's a pretty apt analogy for Hard Knocks to be Tiger Woods. But I did have one other thing. Laloka, you are one of a few kind of prominent, I don't want to say super prominent wormhole, but you're super prominent wormholers that have moved over to Null-Sec Corps. I know someone from TDSIN whose name is escaping me right now moved to Initiative not too long ago. Do you think that's playing any role in kind of Initiative being more interested in wormhole space? Is that you guys have just more wormholers around and people who know the layout and who know the geography?
To some extent, yeah. I think. Well, one of the big reasons why I moved to Initiative in the first place was I wanted to change, right? I wanted to do something a little bit different in EVE. I felt like I'd done everything in wormholes, because before I was doing what I was doing in AFK, I was an FC in Laserhawks for 3 years. So, you know, I've been around a bit. And I wanted to try Null-Sec.
Oh, I thought I recognized you.
Oh, hi.
All right.
Yeah.
It took me a long time. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, there's you know, self-plug. There's some YouTube videos out there if you do want to look. Anyway, you know, in general, I wanted to try something different, but in it, there is people that I've encountered from across time in wormhole space that have already made that move before that are here, and I felt like that would be a good adjustment for me. There were people that sort of got that style, and they were wormholers, you know, and they people like Ari, for example, they were fundamentally me joining in it because they know that side of the game and they still want to play in it, but then at the same time you also get the added benefit of everything else that's happening in Null. And myself as an FC, I get to challenge myself, right? I don't know if there's a phrase that I absolutely love, which is now my title in game, which Exo gave to me, which was that I am the accidental war chief of J-Space, because I did not anticipate the amount of wormhole support for Rage. at all. I contacted 2 groups. They were TDSIN and HK. Everybody else volunteered, and we had over 32 corporations involved from across wormhole space. So it was like everybody who had friends who didn't like HK very much turned up. That was basically the op. I didn't anticipate that much support. I think it's probably just good timing and so on. I don't think I would have been that prominent before this op.
So you're the first wormholer diplomat that we're talking about.
Apparently, I don't know. I mean,
Found
people
the
might
title
say
of our show. We're gonna make it happen.
Diplomat, though.
Sorry, Luca, keep going.
Yeah, let's go with War Chief. I like War Chief. I like to imagine, getting the face paint out before a big op and all of that. But anyway, it's I think a coalition of this nature hasn't been seen before. We've seen people take sides for evictions, but people coming together for more than one op and having the same shared goals in mind, that's quite new, especially on how broad it is at the moment. But I think that's probably not so much a consequence of anything I've done. That's probably a consequence of the amount of evictions that they've either been subjected to or that they've seen happening, and they just they feel that now is the right moment.
All right, my one last question, and this kind of goes out to everybody, Loka and Pando and Meteral too. Do you think CCP is going to iterate on the frigate hull mass at all? Based on what they've seen in the last couple weeks, like, do you think they're sitting back and saying, "Oh shit, look what we've done"? Wormhole fights are now getting to Null-Sec levels, or do you think they're doing the opposite? Do you think they're saying, "Man, we sure did fix this broken thing, and now look at all the cool stuff that's happening"? Like, do you think they're sitting on one side or the other, or do you think they're just completely oblivious?
I think if I'm a CCP dev and I'm trying to create content in wormhole space, I'm rubbing my hands right now. I mean, this has come out of nowhere. All of a sudden, people have rushed back to the game, and there's been these huge fights in TDSIN's home. And sure, some people will turn up, not defend their home, and then some people will. And you won't always get these big fights. But the fantastic thing is nobody cares, and that revitalization of wormhole space has come from what was essentially a bug fix. So somebody somewhere is an accidental genius at the moment because they've revitalized wormhole space without really fundamentally changing anything. I do think that, it is a big change in what it is what you are capable of doing with it, but it was actually, that was the intention of free calls from CCP. And free calls have existed for years and been largely ignored, to be honest with you. That people would scout them and they're just like, it's there. But now all of a sudden, an eviction's happened because of it, and people haven't been able to roll it off, and all of a sudden that is the contentious point, right? But in general, if it means that defenders had access to numbers that they previously didn't have access to, it means that attackers can find it quite difficult to get an overwhelming force in there that's not even possible to fight. Which means that if these big evictions are now going to happen, and if you want to remove a group from wormhole space, then you really need to be ready for it. And I think the scale of the fights that we can now see because of them are even bigger. So for me, it's a positive change. I know a lot of wormholers disagree, probably because they're worried about being evicted, to be honest with you. But in general, and I know Exo has spoken to CCP, and they've come back and said that actually this was the intention, and they're happy with how things are at the moment. So kind of like it or not, this is how it's going to be, I think.
Yeah, if I have to take a guess, then CCP might iterate on it, but for now they're going to sit back and watch what happens. That's what they used to do. That's what they do usually, right? It will at least take a year until they do something similar, or touch them in any way. But yeah, I think wormholers are afraid of evictions, but they're afraid of evictions from Null-Sec now, which is kind of weird. And I don't see that happen. Right? If you're a wormholer and you're afraid, any Null-Sec blob is going to jump in here and do it on their own, I don't believe that. Right? It's a very rare case that we were capable of doing it because we had a good group of wormholers that were motivated to do it, and we were able to convince our guys to stay in a wormhole for a week or around a week. I don't think that's the typical Null-Sec alliance, though, right? So I don't think you have to be too afraid. You should be afraid of your hostiles calling in Null-Sec people though, right? Definitely. So it's not going to be less content, but it's probably going to be different content.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting mixture, if you want my take, at least. Interesting mixture between, I think the lines between wormholers and Null-Sec and low-sec had actually been blurred when Skill Yourself and Volta kind of took over drone regions, right? Like you saw, wow, the Swiss cheese of wormhole access to these regions that are usually so far away that nobody attacks them has really created a new paradigm where even a wormhole group could cause so much damage to an empire that was weak that it could collapse it, and it did. And then you saw wormholers inherit all this territory they didn't know what to do with. Not wormholers, but people who used wormholes to attack. And now you're seeing, I think, part 2 of that, which is the other way around. What happens when Null-Sec gets access to wormholers and can put that weight of N+1 behind whichever group has the best diplomats? So it's interesting. It just feels like they're a little closer together than they might have been.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty apt point, right? Because we did see a few years ago, as you mentioned, like the drone lands in the north over there and the northeast, I guess they definitely fell to just some pressure from wormhole focused groups, and now it's the other. I wonder if this is like just the new paradigm in Eve where everything is getting closer and closer together, and you're just gonna kind of see who rubs one another the wrong way.
Yeah. This may not be settled for a while, just like is Thera a wormhole or not? That argument goes on into eternity. One last question that we should probably cover is, and I don't know if we did before, but Parabellum, is there an ongoing eviction for them right now?
There was. There was, so Wormhole Society and Ovsam Mine, 2 groups that were not involved in the Rage Eviction at all, one way or the other, decided that they wanted to go and evict Parabellum, and then a couple of groups that were part of the Rage Eviction also joined in with them due to some shared hostilities. There was a couple of brawls for hull control. Both sides have taken victories and losses, and then I think it's now stabilized with Parabellum successfully defending.
And Parabellum is usually allied with Inner Hell, is that correct?
They previously were. I can't say on stream particularly what it was said between the 2 groups when they fell apart from each other, but essentially there was some drama that happened during the Beyond the Breach eviction, and it could have been longer term. It could have built up over time. I'm not sure on the specifics, but what I can say is that at this moment in time, there are 2 groups called Parabellum and Time Crit that were previously part of Inner Hell's network of blues that are no longer there, and they were quite a significant portion of them as well.
Got it. Well, this is awesome. I am so happy to see that you guys are thrilled with some of the changes. I will say at least one other thing. When we interviewed CCP Muppet Hunter a couple of weeks ago, I think he had something to say about this. Didn't he say like you haven't seen the last of the wormhole changes? Like maybe they were going to modify some of their changes.
Yeah, they kind of left it open there, and I feel like they leave it open on purpose so people just don't get too lax, and they want to keep moving, and they don't get too comfortable.
Yeah, I got the impression he was saying like we might have overdone it, so we're going to watch this, and you might see that you haven't heard the last of us on this, so that's good. Carneros. Let's move on to Serenity. That's big news. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the actual news, if you haven't heard it, is that CCP's Chinese partner NetEase successfully acquired, after 2 years of working on this, successfully acquired a license to publish EVE Online again in China. So that means they can now charge for the period, for participation on Serenity. That means they now stop any kind of wiping the server and trying out patches on it and playing around. No, it's a live service now, and they have to treat it like a live service. It is a huge accomplishment to get a license like that. It is a lot of work. It is not easy. It is not guaranteed because you're a big company like Tencent or NetEase. Hell no. It's actually really, really hard to do. A lot of games get submitted, a few number get approved. Don't think for a moment that the Chinese government is sitting there going, we have a lot of people stuck at home, sequestered at the moment. We should give them more video games to play. Oh, no. They don't think like that. No. So my hat comes off symbolically to the team at NetEase who got this through. That's an accomplishment. Those people should be enjoying some champagne right now.
Well, there goes my theory. I thought they were trying to create as many economic stimulation. Okay, totally wrong.
So what does this actually mean? So I understand that Serenity is now going to be back in China, which means that Chinese players can play EVE on a local server without having to go through any hoops. Because if I understand it right, they can currently access Tranquility, but in order to get full use out of it, they have to go through a VPN, and it's not exactly super easy.
Right. They have to pay a little extra to their ISP for the VPN service. Here are the differences. If you play on the international server, there are some Chinese people to talk to, but a lot of stuff happens in a foreign language, and you're connecting long distance to London, so you have latency to deal with. If you're playing in China, the Chinese servers are in Hangzhou. Hangzhou is 2 hours drive, more or less, from Shanghai. So depending on where you are in the country, that's pretty darn close. Hangzhou is a big commerce and manufacturing center itself. It's a big city. It's modern. It's it's a good location. It's relatively central to the Chinese population centers. Yeah. So you have less latency, and you have an all-Chinese context there. Everything's in Chinese. You're not going to run into anyone you can't talk to in local. So basically, you have if you're a Chinese corp in EVE Online, you now have to make a decision between, are we going to split our time between two worlds? Are we going to focus more on one or the other, and which? So you have to think about that.
Well, and also I had one more question. So when they shut off Serenity 2 or 3 years ago, it feels like it's been a long time actually. When they turn it back on, are all the assets going to be there from the old players, or are they starting with a new server, or do we even know?
I only have rumors from that part. I've never gotten on Serenity. I don't know. The times I went, I briefly worked out of the Shanghai office at CCP years ago, but I only was focused on Dust 514 monetization at the time, so I didn't have any idea what was going on. And the servers weren't in the Shanghai office anyway in those days. It was still, a partner that managed them. But the rumors I hear is, a lot of the assets are basically still there. They're running an older version of EVE. They're running a version that Titans can have hog guns. Minerals have not been nerfed. A lot of things are a bit back. There might be people in chat who know more actually than I do.
My best information is, sorry, Panda, we'll let you right in. My best information is that they will have a continuation of what was there before. It will not be a blank slate. I've heard that from several sources that were probably pretty knowledgeable, but CCP itself hasn't said anything declarative yet. In fact, the server is not even open yet. It's just announced that it made it through the approval process. So I guess we'll find out.
I just wanted to throw in, I did talk to one of the bigger leaders of Chinese alliances and asked right away, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back, or are you going to stay on Tranquility? Which I hope is the case, because we need more players on Tranquility. But so what he said was that they would be going back, but they just go back for like housekeeping, you know? So they go back, clean the place up, make sure everything is all right, but they're going to still be playing on Tranquility, which, you know, obviously that might be the plan. How it works out for them in the end, I don't know. Right? I can't even imagine playing on 2 servers. Like, that's craziness.
Yeah, our producer January Jones actually reached out to Drone
Valentine.
Drone. I'm sorry,
January Jones, I think, is an actress, but
yeah, that's. I was thinking of Jessica Jones from.
oh yeah,
Netflix. But Drone Wang from Ranger Regiment. Thank you, January Valentine. And his insight was, it was basically, we're gonna go back, but the economy is so messed up over on Serenity that a lot of our pilots really like it here on Tranquility, and we're going to split our time, which is similar to what Pando got, but our focus is going to be on Tranquility for now, unless something big changes on the Serenity server.
Well, and the question of the blank slate or a continuation of what was there before is a big question, because that server was more or less conquered by a group called PIBC. And in Tranquility, the international server that we all play, that group is mostly known as Army of Mango. So the question is, are they going to disappear and go back to redominating Serenity if there's a continuation? Or if it's a blank slate, are they going to go and have months and months of conquering time? So those are why the question of blank slate or continuation is important. Now, if they think everything's coming back the way it was and they were already in control and dominating that server, then yeah, it's going to be housekeeping for them, and they're going to go over there and just make sure everything stays pacified, and then come back to Tranquility where they're an actual growing power. I can see that's probably our best information on what's going to happen.
Yeah, obviously you can tell who I was talking to, right?
Well, you were probably talking to Ranger Regiment, or
no, I wasn't. No,
oh, then you were talking to Army of Mango.
Army of Mangoes, correct?
Yeah.
Both those groups, I think, are from PIBC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think so. The history of them, like, super complicated, right? But yeah, I think so at least. That's the thing with the Army of Mangoes. They do like VVV and the other guys, that the Panther-aligned Chinese players. They also like the Ranger Regiment guys. And it's only Fraternity that they don't like, but then Fraternity likes the other guy. And it's such a mess.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's part of the reason why we hope they stay on.
Yeah, we like that complication.
They're just this awesome mess and like tangled mess of who likes who and who hates who, and eventually it's going to come to a head, and they're going to just start blowing each other up, hopefully.
Well, the leader of Fraternity, Naros, has never played on Serenity. He's always played on Tranquility. Same with Wind Spirits. He's always played on Tranquility. So there are Chinese groups, just like there are Japanese groups, that have played on Tranquility and never played on Serenity. So, but yeah, a lot of players came over when Serenity closed down. If they wanted to continue to play EVE, maybe a lot of people just stopped playing. But those that did, if they leave, is it going to make a big difference? I think this, by the way, I think the server is the international server is much more interesting because you have different time zones. Therefore, you need to have alliances. If you're playing Serenity, you're in one time zone. So basically, everybody gets on at the same time and gets off at the same time.
Which is also struggle time zone tanking, right? Time zone tanking is already shit if like time zones differ. But if everyone's in the same time zone, then suddenly, but all the timers are in a different time zone, like nobody can really go there, right? And it's not like there's a lot of non-Chinese players on Serenity, right? It's not like you can't fill that gap easily. Like everyone is Chinese time zone. But then suddenly the timers are going to be in the worst possible time.
Well, I'm not really believing the things that I'm reading on Tiaba. the social media over in China, and I'm not really believing all the stuff that I see in the Chinese language talking in stations subforum, because there's just a lot of posturing and fun, teasing each other and things like that, rumors, joking. People say crazy, outlandish things, but we're just going to have to watch and see how the players split their time and what they do. But it's going to be fun to keep an eye on, and I hope we come back to this topic in a couple weeks.
Oh, we will. Okay, what else have we got in the news?
I saw something interesting in Fountain yesterday, in Fountain Intel, in KVN TAC 36. I saw Pittsburgh 2989. Remember Pittsburgh?
Fleet Commander, yeah.
He had a new corp tag on him. Former Bastion Corp original centers, now in NC.
Oh. So he became NC. FC, huh?
Yeah. Well, he's, wherever he goes, he's an FC. That's what he does. So he's going to bring it. He's going to bring it somewhere. It does sort of point to a continued migration a bit from trigger happy since Kendar went on hiatus. Yeah, thank you for throwing that up on the screen, Professor McLeod. Very nice. The original centers right there.
At least, what do you know about that?
So I don't know too much about it. I obviously know Pittsburgh is one of the few people left in EVE that kind of like to do big fishing ops. He used to be in the Imperium. I believe he used to be in Goonswarm, actually. And he moved over, and it wasn't like a very happy moving departure for him. He joined Trigger Happy, and then right around the same time, he killed the largest Locust fleet ever, which is just he
was a part of that. The credit actually goes to.
He played a pivotal role, but not the sole role, right? So he did a lot of work with that, and that's kind of his play style, to look for the whales and kill them, at least from what I understand. But it does seem to be a bit of a cooling for Trigger Happy, who, over the summer they became kind of like the flavor of the month, like the hip cool alliance, because they were doing everything right. They seem to be having all the fun in the game, and so a lot of people moved over to Trigger Happy, hoping to find their moment of glory. And it doesn't seem like Trigger Happy is dying in any sense. Just a lot of the people that joined for those exciting months are saying, well, that time is over. Let's kind of go on with our lives. I think Pitts just wanted to do some bigger things, and NC. has like a bigger arsenal that he can play with, right?
Yeah, just to be complete about that, it was Chosu from, I think, Horde and I think Omeka that were setting up that strike, and Pittsburgh brought them intel and the ability with a spy to trigger it, but it was already being set up as one of the biggest ambushes the game has ever seen. Actually, it probably is the biggest ambush. No, I don't know. It depends. If you super capital ambushes can get very expensive too. But whatever, it was
the most oracles ever killed in one sitting, and we did have them on the show at the time, and they did say like, this was like a lot of planning, but it was also like 80% luck that everything managed to work just at like the perfect time.
Yeah, it's usually what happens is in ops like that, you put in all that effort, you think you can predict every move and shit. But then in the end, some dude lights the wrong sign, or something is not in place, something goes wrong. It might just be a minor thing. Maybe there's a little gang coming by, and then suddenly all the rockets get spooked and stuff like this. So, yeah.
I've always been a big believer that EVE Online players are mistake machines. So if you can force a mistake out of someone, that's how you
exactly
have success. But I think I think it's a big move because, like he's one of those spooky ghost types of FCs. So we'll see what he can pull off with like a bigger bag of tools at his.
Now it's so if he left Trigger Happy, which is where he went, what's happening with Trigger Happy? Anyone know?
I don't have too much insight in it. I know there's actually 2 former PL corps in Trigger Happy. There's Israd and Higher Than Everest. Harvey Skywalker's Corp and Peanut Smashers Corp.
Peak.
And they're very FC dense. Sorry, Pando probably knows more.
No, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think now it's in Vertizo's hands, right? Because Mark, he kind of, I mean, he had to pick it up when Kenda went inactive. He didn't go inactive saying, "Hey, I'm going to be gone from next week." No, he just, dropped out and said, "Here, have it all," And Mark Atreides, I think his name is, he picked it up in a moment's notice and tried to make it work, but it's quite tough to make an alliance, to lead an alliance from one day to the other, especially if it's like one like a charismatic leader like Kenda in place, and then suddenly you should replace this guy. Like, how's this possible, right? So I think he burned himself a little bit out trying to make it work, and some corps were a little bit, they weren't happy with it and left, and so he decided to step back, and now Vertizo is taking over, I believe. And yeah, Snuff reforming, what a timing that is. So those Snuff corps that joined, and maybe some extra trigger corps that are now, joining Snuff. I'm not sure about that, but yeah. So the timing just doesn't work out that well. But it's still a little, like a small group at least, that are looking to do their own thing. So I think they're going to be all right, just not on the same scale, right? They were building up to be like a solid, like really big group of for that gameplay. But no, they have to be they have to aim a little bit smaller, I guess.
So I will say I know the people in Israel very, very well. Peanut Smash is one of the people that I've probably spent the most time in the game with. He was basically one of the few people that was running the running PL towards for quite a while, actually, for I think almost like a year and a half. He was running a lot of at least the US time zone stuff. He is incredibly gifted, and his play style and Peak's play style from Higher Than Everest, I think they synergize very well for small, medium gang stuff. I think he's probably one of those names that many people aren't aware of, or they don't take seriously, and they absolutely should. He's been playing Eve at some of the highest levels for a very long time. And he is, I was mentioning what Pittsburgh does in terms of hunting whales and setting things up like that. I think Peanut does that better than anyone else in the game currently. So I think you're right.
Even that Red Baron guy that takes the really rare ships off people.
Even Frederick Von Hole, I think Peanut Smash is a little bit better. He just has different priorities. I don't want to say better, but they're in the same area, but Peanut focuses on different. But yeah, I think so. I think as long as Israel and Peak are in Trigger Happy, I think they'll be absolutely.
So he's staying in Trigger Happy. Okay.
I have no idea. They might leave for Snuff tomorrow.
I heard a troll rumor that he was going to Conifers. But
he might too. Those groups actually do similar things.
I've heard both things, so I don't know. But what about this Snuff reconstituting? I heard Snuff is back.
I think it remains to be seen what happens with. I don't know. I think.
I don't know. Subject for a future show.
There's a lot of silence around this.
They actually killed Vertizo's Titan, I believe.
Snuff did recently.
Yeah, there was some. I don't have the full story. I just heard it, and it's not a backstab or anything, but it's like there was some weird stuff happening.
They didn't realize it was a Vertizo alt. He has a lot.
You know what? There's no deal in place beside any of them, and he was still sitting on grid, and it's not like, okay, we've got a Titan tackle. He's neutral. We have no reason not to shoot him, and so he died. And I think that's the big part of the Snuff rebuild, is not having any deals with anyone. So they had to stick to that, I guess, and the Titan's dead. But I think there was some arrangements done. There's no bad blood or anything.
Who's running Snuff?
Well, that would be high in Tau, I would guess. Definitely high. I'm not sure if Tau is back.
We'll have to get more information on this, but
I'm pretty sure High is still running.
we have heard that Snuff is back. Trigger Happy is becoming a quiet place. And NC is picking some corporations off as well, like thanks to Odin here, Eclipse, Pulsar, and Hell Brothers went over to NC Dot. So there's some movements. Okay, so other news. Do you guys have any other news? I have a few things to go through myself here.
Go for it.
We started a new show called Quarantine in Stations for all of us that are stuck in homes that can't go anywhere. And it's a joke about a very serious subject, but we need to keep light about it because it's going to be a whole new normal for a while for a lot of people, millions and millions of people, and maybe the entire world, as the real life outbreak, is wrestled with by everybody. So we on that show we talk to people about COVID-19 and just where we're at, what our local situation is. We try not to give out like information because information is constantly changing, and it's we're not medical professionals or anything like that, but we just want to like use this medium of being able to talk to each other without any boundaries, being able to talk to each other and keep community while people are basically stuck in quarantines or in homes. So we'll be doing that a bit. Look for those. There's also other stuff like there was an orca kill mail that went for 150 billion. The poor guy lost a lot of blueprints, and the follow-up stories are that he's pretty beat up about it. Not because he lost the stuff, which I understand, just because the reaction is kind of harsh from some people. You guys have any advice for him?
All you can do is your own personal best, man. It's okay. It'll come back. You'll just get it again.
I kind of feel like, hey man, it's only bad until the next guy does something, and then everybody will forget about you, and that lets you go back to your gameplay. So hang in there. Don't leave EVE Online. Stick it out. Really, it's not that big a deal. The fact that you had that much money to begin with, or that much value, is something to be proud of. Go ahead.
It's just 150 bill though, right?
Was it 100? Yeah, 150 billion. Just 150 billion.
On.
Okay.
That's peanuts.
Well, out of one person, that's a lot. It's a big chunk, but.
And he's someone who has lost a lot in the past. The guy is known by all the gankers and rancer, let's just say. But this time he got a lot of negative feedback among his social peers that he actually cares about. So I don't know. There are going to be some people in other parts of EVE that won't care about his kill board and might be happy to be a new set of friends for him. That's all I could think of.
So one of the funnier elements to this story is somehow this came across my mom's feed. She was like, "Hey, I was reading about this game you play. Some guy lost and I don't remember what the news article was.
5,000.
Yeah, it was like $5,000. She was like, "Hey, I didn't know you could have money in here." So I had to explain the whole thing to her. It's a trap. You put money in, but you can't ever get it out. But yeah, so it actually hit that story hit completely non-EVE people. So that was quite fun.
And that's pretty cool. I mean, if nothing else, you have to see you've created a moment that resonates outside of EVE Online. That is very hard to do. So good for you for building up all that value. It's 150 billion in blueprints, but you have to count all that research value that's in there too. It's actually even more valuable to us as players, but the point is you got this headline that reminds everybody of what an interesting game EVE Online is. So you, in fact, have sacrificed to do something very important for EVE Online, and that is keep it in the imagination of people out there that have no idea about what this game is like.
And that's absolutely how you should take it. You should not take it on the other side is Elise Randolph's mom is making fun of you. So yeah, don't take it like that. You definitely have Matteralls.
Well, she wasn't making fun of him, right? She was like, that's interesting. You could spend so much money on this.
Yeah, we'll get that.
So that happened. And also a new Pulse video came out that showed, this is interesting for people who like Wormholes, the Apocrypha trailer actually had a voiceover that was taken off when they released the expansion trailer. And I got to say, that expansion trailer was probably the weakest trailer for the best expansion I've ever seen. So that voiceover actually gave, they put it back on and they displayed it for people. You can see that on CCP's YouTube. Look for a Pulse video. About halfway through, they go through the Apocrypha trailer. And all that voiceover is information that our lore experts are like, crawling through to see if there are any details in there. So they're very excited about that.
The guy pictured there that's telling you, that's presenting this, that you don't see him on camera very often, by the way. I don't remember his CCP name. He has been there for years and years and years and years, and he's one of the team in the background that makes all the great trailers that you see.
Oh, the guy that introduces the video.
Yeah, he's one of the. He's normally he plays a part in all the big trailers, but it's normally not anything you'd ever see on camera. He's one of the guys who helps make the great trailers. He's been there for many years.
I think if I recognize him, he's a visual effects sound guy, isn't he?
I think he does more than that, but yeah.
There's a video that shows the making of scope videos, and it was the making of This Is Eve video, and he was on that video doing a lot of I think he was doing visual effects.
Yeah. Very talented man. And I think he originally, I don't remember this part really well, but I think he originally came to CCP because they saw a fan video he made and they reached out and contacted him and said, hey, would you like to come work for the company? Like a way long time ago.
I bet I know which one it was. It's where the pod gets sliced in half, probably. Because that was a short video, but it was completely original and intense. Anyway,
the other trailer guy also had a similar origin. So
they had two.
Forget his name. But the guy who made the Tortuga video, like the old Mercenary Coalition Tortuga video from like 13 years ago, I think that's how I got to start at CCP as well. Great video maker.
Wild. And Eve TV is going to make a comeback, which we haven't seen in a decade, probably. Eve TV would be the project of, I think his name is is it Weetabix or something? CCP Weetabix? I don't know. Is Weetabix the right? I don't know.
That sounds vaguely correct. And CCP zoned 3 as the other guy, but yeah. There were 4 of them on the team when I worked there. As far as I know, that team is still pretty much intact today, and I don't know too much detail now, but very talented.
CCP Fleabix.
Fleabix. All right. Weetabix, I think, is a reference to pot, if I'm not mistaken. Being stoned. I forget. It's not my thing. Okay. Last thing is, it was this week. It's just this week is so weird, but wasn't it this week that the patch came through? Has it been 1 or 2 weeks? And there was a huge amount of somewhat distress over the market seizing to a halt, which is so interesting because it mimics real life in the United States too. But a new market patch has made trading much more expensive. Therefore, traders are taking a wait and see approach, and markets in EVE Online have seized. And I think it's a really interesting time to watch what the market play does, because people who are true marketeers, people who trade stuff on markets, are going to be much more in demand as their knowledge of how things move historically is becoming a lot more valuable. So the pedestrian people that used to put something into the market and just change it every 10 minutes by 1 or 2 cents, that whole gameplay style is wiped off as it becomes inefficient.
You know, I'll tell you what I've heard. That is a reaction that the players are doing, like some market traders are doing, to change the way their methodology based on these new costs to relist. So instead of going back in and relisting, their new approach is, okay, let's say I have 100 of these X types that I want to sell. Instead of putting them all up and then changing their price occasionally, I'm going to put up 25 of them, and then I'm going to watch to see what the market does. And if someone comes in at just underneath me in price, I'm not going to change the first set. I'm going to take another 25 and I'm going to put them up just underneath that. And then I'm going to wait, blah, blah, blah. And so what they're doing instead of changing the price is just putting up more of their reserved quantity. That's what one market trader explained to me was the next standard practice.
Yeah, well, the point is markets are really, really changing in a big way. So check that out. And we'll see what the ripple effects are throughout the rest of the game, because markets affect the rest of the game. All right. Well, we've reached the end of Talking in Stations for this week. It's quite an eventful week. One more thing that you should know at this point, just to compare it to real life, like my state of California and the United States in general declared states of emergency over this outbreak of COVID-19. It's kind of reminiscent of, in a weird way, FanFest about 2 years ago, where they did an outbreak scenario and they RP'd it. And they RP'd it in the game, and they RP'd it in real life at the FanFest, and it was this whole thing. And here we are living it in real life a little bit.
Imagine that timing working out. That would have been awkward, huh?
Yeah, well, yeah.
You have all this stuff planned for FanFest and like this whole like whatever law, I don't know, outbreak thing, and then suddenly there's an outbreak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Eve was prescient, or saw it coming. It is like we're kind of overdue. As I was talking to a park ranger in the Sierras, that's a mountain range in California. He's like one of the only scientists that works for the ranging the federal system, and I got a chance to sit with and talk with him about these bark beetles that were eating these trees and killing them in the Sequoia National Forest, which is really scary when you see that. And I said, "Is that climate change in our eyes, in front of us?" And he said, "Yeah, sort of, because the beetle survives longer in a warmer summer or in a warmer winter and that sort of thing." And I said, "Well, what do you think is going to happen? Are they going to take out the whole forest? I mean, how much trouble are we in?" And he goes, "Well, normally when a population gets too big and goes unchecked, a pathogen will come in, and that's what we expect to happen to the beetle." And I will always remember that nature has a way of balancing itself. And I'm not saying that this coronavirus is like nature balancing the human race and stuff. It's just that there are so many variables to the world that I've always expected something like this would happen. So it's quite terrifying to be in the middle of it and to have this like new normal probably for, I don't think a few weeks, but maybe a few months, maybe a couple of years. Who knows? Who knows how things change after this? One thing that won't change is the Talking in Stations will be here to talk with you guys as we all go through it together. And it's one of the advantages of virtual world is that we can be far apart yet be in the same place at one time.
You may not be able to listen to us on your commute to work, but you can just have us chilling in your house.
Well, that's right. We're going to lose our whole audience because nobody's going to commute anywhere. Okay, well, that's all right. We'll still do it. All right. Any last, I guess, Pando or anyone have some shout outs?
I would say maybe shout out to all the Wormhole corps that helped, not just TDSIN or maybe the bigger ones like POSB, Exit Strategy, but also like smaller stuff, or MCAF, smaller corps like Hateful Intent, Outfoxed, the Spoopy guys, that's the Brave Dudes, Hidden Baguette, or Volta helped out, Band of Magnus, Outfit 418, Moist, Wholesale Operations, Nomex, Tsundere, Geskos Lovenska. Now I have to read them actually. There's like 6 or 7 more. Great White Hunters, Frozen Corpse, Biomass Party, It Is Really Us, Sana, Compania, The Nameless Alliance, Interbellum, Shadowflight, Transformo Graphicizers, which is a great name by the way, and Les Deux Mousquetaires. I don't know if that's pronounced right. It probably
LDM.
isn't.
LDM.
See, one wants to have their ways of, you know.
I'm proud
Good
of you.
shit.
Not so easy to pronounce things, right? Not in an
No, it's
international
not.
game. Yeah, thank you. All right, man. Thanks a lot. And thank you guys. Carneros Elise, thank you for coming. Loka, thank you for showing up. And Pando, of course. Would like to say thank you to our producer, January Valentine, our stream engineer, McLeod, the magician. And thanks to all of you for showing up and watching us today live and listening to us afterwards. All right, everybody. Thanks very much. That's all for us today. We will see you next time on Talking in Stations.